How do you handle your Broncos and Packers in FFPC best ball drafts right now after the Nathaniel Hackett hire? Has Jalen Waddle risen too high or not high enough in 2022 ADP? And which Cardinals wide receiver should go after DeAndre Hopkins in the 2022 FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament at the moment? Plus, the 2021 FFPC main event fifth place finisher, the 2021 FFPC 1250 Live Best Ball number 2 winner, and the 2021 FFPC Bare Knuckle Challenge champion. No, not 3 separate people. It was all the same gentleman. It's Mike Zuka dropping in to tell us a little bit about the sleeper picks that gave him a very profitable season last year, how he's handling Steelers with Pittsburgh, how to handle these Steelers after Ben Roethlisberger's retirement, and much, much more. We've got a great show for you. Farrell Elliott is here. I'm Eric Balkman. Stick around. Your high-stakes fantasy football hour starts now.
Broadcast live and heard around the world, you are now listening to the most entertaining hour of radio on the planet. Welcome to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, presented by MyFFPC.com, with your hosts Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour is your home for analysis from the best players in the world. And now, because no one else was available, here's Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott.
Thank you so much, Rob, and thank you to the Quiet Howlers. Remember to check out their .com. Greetings and salutations to all of you Bulkaholics and Farelliacs. Welcome to the latest episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com. I'm your slightly above average host, Eric Balkman, and my co-host is the definitive commissioner of fantasy football, Farrell Elliott, who is already taking advantage of the 2022 inaugural Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament with the FFPC. Farrell, I just saw a screenshot that you had sent me about 20 minutes ago. You're looking like you're drafting a winner here from the 4 spot, man.
Well, buddy, thank you. The 4 spot was a natural place to start this year. I was happy with it.
I think, and we'll get into this draft and with the. I don't think we've talked about the Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament on this program yet. But we will get into that shortly here tonight. That's just one of the many topics that we'll be getting into. We're going to talk about how you should be drafting Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski in this competition, whether Trey Lance should be drafted ahead of Russell Wilson right now, and then Mike Zuka, a winner of dozens of 2021 FFPC leagues, totaling nearly $50,000 in prizes, is going to join us to talk about his thoughts on the forgotten running backs draft start. Oh, yeah, I remember those days. Dalton Schultz's viability as a sleeper in 2022 and much more. Shout out to the chat room right now. If you have any questions, you can post them right in there. If you want to connect with us on Twitter, the show is at HSFF Hour. I am at Eric Balkman. Mike Zuka is on Twitter at Mike Zuka. That's MikeZucca. Farrell's Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship is at KFFSC.com. Facebook.com/HSFF Hour is our show there. And if you want to give us a ring, 347-426-3682. That's 347-GAME-OBA. HighStakesFantasyFootball@gmail.com is where to reach us if you have any questions for us. Send them in now. We'll try to get to all of the chat room questions, all of the show tweets, all of the show emails, and fantasy feedback coming up later on in the show. Thanks to our audio engineer and my best friend Bryce, and our producer and mutual friend Rob. Without further ado, let's get into it here, ladies and gentlemen. The inaugural Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament is going on right now. $125 entry fee gives you a shot at a $25,000 grand prize, a prize pool totaling well over $130,000, and this is limited to 1,152 teams. The interesting thing about this, the draft started a few days ago. They're actually going to end on April 28th, 2022. Yeah, that's right, a fantasy football competition that ends on April 28th before the NFL draft. This is a slim format. This year, the FFPC changed it. No 18-round slims anymore. It's only 20-round slims. There's no kicker, no defenses, 14-week regular season, and then you get your single-week elimination thrilling playoffs from weeks 15 through 17. Drafts are available in the sit-and-go, the 2-hour clock, the 6-hour clock, all at myffpc.com/never-too-early. Live draft going on tomorrow, and the sit-and-goes and the slows are filling up right now. That's not all. The KFFSC has 2 spots left in their Super Sunday Big Payback League that drafts the day before Valentine's Day, a.k.a. Super Bowl Sunday, at 12 noon Eastern Time. 2 spots left in that, and then don't forget about the Super Sunday Championship. Those leagues are filling up fast. You want to make sure that you get in on those. Drafts starting all Super Bowl weekend, including Saturday at 1 p.m., and it goes through Super Bowl weekend. 2:30 p.m. is the final one that goes on Super Bowl Sunday. And then February 20th, the draft I'm going to get in, that is at 8 o'clock the following Sunday after the Super Bowl. It's always depressing when the Super Bowl is over. No more football, right, until the NFL draft or until preseason, what have you. Not the case here, as you can get in not only in the Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament, but the KFFSC Super Sunday Championship as well. Good stuff there, and that's what you can check out right now at myffpc.com and kffsc.com. Let's get into the Fantasy Flash and an ode to Ben Roethlisberger to lead things off tonight, Farrell. He has retired after nearly 2 decades on the professional gridiron. The 2004 draft's number 11 overall pick from Miami of Ohio had his Steelers win 14 straight games in his rookie year to get to the AFC Championship game. They finished 15-1, lost to New England that year. But the following year, they beat the Seahawks in the Super Bowl. Roethlisberger never won league MVP. He actually never received any first-team All-Pro honors. But remember, he was a contemporary of Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, and Aaron Rodgers. No doubt a Hall of Famer who is 5th all-time in career passing, 64,000 yards, top 5 single-game passing effort with over 500 yards in 2014, top 10 single-season effort for passing the football in 2018. Had the bad elbow injury and surgery in 2019, but he retires at age 39. Farrell, this is fascinating stuff because as we draft in the FFPC and KFFSC right now, we do not know. We have no sort of proof, no sort of confirmation on who the Steelers signal caller is going to be. So how should this affect guys like Deontay Johnson, your favorite Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster coming off an injury, Pat Freiermuth? How do you handle Steelers in drafts right now, knowing that the top option, quite frankly, is in-house, is Mason Rudolph?
Balky, this could be the one question that we built the entire show around. We could talk about it, bring Mike in, keep talking about it, we could cover it, and it would make for an interesting show. But I'll quickly answer your question. I think we've got to look at who is staying, and who is staying is Matt Canada. And you'd have to understand why he is still there. He was brought in to prepare. They keep talking about the fact that the Steelers don't have a plan for quarterback. Canada was brought in to work with both Rudolph and Hoskins, the other quarterback, whoever the third string. Yeah, Haskins. They were brought in to work with these players and develop these players. And when the offense struggled so badly, they had to let the previous OC go. And stepping up in the position was Canada. Now he's a guy. And now Adam Krautwurst, this would drive him crazy, our good friend and fantasy player in Buffalo. But this is a guy who is employing the same scheme that's being played in Buffalo. So you think about how do you make the Pittsburgh Steelers look like the success that the Buffalo Bills are having? And you think about the heir apparent to Roethlisberger. And I would predict that the Steelers would go into the draft and find a quarterback. And the quarterback that I would find would be Matt Corral. And I would put they kept winning. They kept going to playoffs. Now the Steelers draft from the 20th position. If you want to know who Matt Corral is, you can look at his stats. You'll be amazed at his rushing numbers. Look up October 16th when Ole Miss played Tennessee Volunteers. Corral threw for over 200 yards and almost rushed for the same amount. It was a fantastic effort. That's the kind of quarterback that this team needs. And we could talk about all other heir apparent quarterbacks. You know, everyone assumes that Trey Lance is going, no matter what the result with Jimmy Garoppolo in San Francisco, that Trey Lance is going to be at quarterback next year. Well, if that's the case, Garoppolo's got to have somewhere to play. This would be a nice landing spot for him. There's a lot of things to talk about in this.
No, and you're right, and I think like what the part I'm agreeing with you here is I don't think the starting quarterback, or at least the guy that will start the majority of the games for Pittsburgh next year, is on the roster right now. And how are high stakes players handling this? You look at FFPC best ball drafts right now. There's some Najee Harris discussion going on in the chat room right now with the Dizzle and Hudson Kern-Reeve here talking about where he's going, and Najee Harris is pretty much going where he was last year at the 111 spot. But then you look at, so Deontay Johnson, right, everybody's favorite target hog, is going at wide receiver 16 right now, and I just missed it. 405 is where he is going in draft. So he has slipped a little bit. Chase Claypool, you look at that player here, who was a darling last year. He's fallen to wide receiver 41 at the 8-10. I mean, going one spot behind rookie Garrett Wilson, one spot ahead of Kadarius Toney. Juju Smith-Schuster, who is coming off of injury here after tearing his ACL in the 2021 season. Just trying to find where he is going. Wide receiver 50 at the 11:01. This is all in FFPC Best Ball. Shout out to Darren Armani from FantasyMojo.com, who supplies us with this ADP, and seriously a must-have if you are drafting in the FFPC, a season-long membership at FantasyMojo.com. Let's move on, and because I think you're right, Farrell. We could dwell the whole hour on this, of all the different ways that the Steelers' offense could go this year. We'll get more clarity on that as the season goes on. The Denver Broncos have a new head coach. It is former Packers offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett, a 42-year-old guy who's never been a head coach in the NFL before, but this is his 13th season in the NFL as an assistant. People in Green Bay raved about him, both fellow coaches and players, the media. Now, Matt LaFleur did call plays with Green Bay, but Nathaniel Hackett got these guys ready to go on Friday with the meetings that he led, the tip sheets that he produced that all the players loved. And certainly, I guess, Farrell, the million-dollar question here is Nathaniel Hackett goes to Denver. Are Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams catching the next flight out there to Denver to play in the Mile High City next year? We don't know for sure, but there's a lot of people that basically have cemented this as gospel that it's going to happen. And if that's the case, even if it's not the case, if you're drafting right now, how do you handle guys not only like Rodgers, Adams, but Lazard, Alan Lazard, Robert Tonyan, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Randall Cobb, Amari Rodgers, and then you flip over to Denver with Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy and all those players as well. Very, very confusing here.
It is, and I think you have to. I think what we're going to see in Green Bay is what we see every year. Those players you mentioned outside of Rodgers, Adams, Jones, those players have relatively suppressed draft value anyway. It always is odd to me how even Rodgers often goes later in the drafts, and it's an expectation of how he goes to the Broncos. So understanding, as our fantasy players do, the salary cap aspect of professional football, how do you make this happen? Well, Denver Broncos general manager that took that job, George Payton, he had lots of offers for jobs that he turned down, but he finally took Denver, and I think one of the reasons he did is it had a manageable salary cap. They've got $48 million under the cap already this year. They've got space to assume two superstars and put them on the field. I think it's a fantastic opportunity, and, yeah, it could happen. The money's there. The planning's there, and Balky, no one knows about how these players are dealing with the current group in Green Bay, what their relationship is with them. But the best relationship from Rodgers, that I understand, is Hackett, and he just left town.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll see what happens there, right? Because you have two other guys that are qualified to take over at offensive coordinator with Adam Stenavich, who worked wonders with that Packers offensive line this year, and then you have a situation with Luke Getsy, who actually got a couple of head coaching interviews as well, and we'll see what happens with his career going forward. The Bears have offered him the offensive coordinator position in Chicago, and this is something Hudson Kern-Reeve is talking about in the chat room right now. Matt Eberflus, the new Bears head coach, is the former defensive coordinator for Indianapolis. So obviously, whoever they hire as the OC, it's going to have a massive impact, not only on Justin Fields, but Allen Robinson and David Montgomery and Cole Kmet and Darnell Mooney, and all those skill positions. It's a lot to work with in Chicago there, too. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Green Bay going forward with the fallout from this. Now, Hackett has not hired his staff yet, and we will be looking forward to see who that is because that will affect several teams as well. Moving on to the Buccaneers. Rob Gronkowski said this week that he would retire if he had to decide right now. This is according to Jenna Lane on Twitter. Rob Gronkowski said that he's going to use the next 3 to 5 weeks to try to figure out what's going to go on in his NFL career. He is obviously a Hall of Fame tight end who's already hung up the cleats once and come back, and maybe he does it again this year. So Tom Brady, we don't know what's going to happen with him. Now, the latest reports I saw this evening seem to state that that Brady is leaning closer to retirement rather than coming back for another season, another go-round in Tampa. Farrell, what's interesting about this, and I brought this up with Dizzle today, if you look at the FFPC best ball drafts right now, the FFPC ADP, you are looking at a situation where you could get Tom Brady at the 10:02, and you could pair him, if you wanted to, with Rob Gronkowski in the I guess they're both going in the 10th round right now. Brady at the 10:02, so you'd have to take Brady in the 9th, but then you get Rob Gronkowski in the 10th. This was one of the best quarterbacks we had in the league, statistically speaking, last year in Brady, and certainly one of the best tight ends we saw in the league, and now they're both double-digit round picks. What would you be doing if you were drafting in, say, the Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament? Say you were drafting in the Super Sunday competition with the KFFSC. If you were doing that, are these guys worth the risks at this point?
I don't want to draft him in our format of the Never Too Early because the tale of retirement hanging over his head is too strong of one. Now, I don't know. I understand that he's wired differently than this. Perhaps he's pulling a Gronkowski. He'll retire here and return later. I don't know. You can see that he's going to have a hard time. The team is older. My good buddy Robbie Fetcher points out to me that the team is going to have a hard time replacing some of the players that they are going to lose by either attrition or injury or some salary cap issues. So and you saw that perhaps if Antonio Brown had danced off the field earlier, they could have made adjustments on the fly and fixed that. But yeah, and interesting though, in the 10th round, wasn't that essentially where Brady was going this time last year, and Gronkowski even later?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
nothing perhaps there has really changed. There's in the KFFSC where you have managed leagues, you can go ahead and spend that draft capital on him, and if he doesn't play, you can easily replace him through the waiver wire. So yes, there, but if he doesn't play in the Never Too Early, you're stuck with probably only 2 quarterbacks, and that would be a tragedy, perhaps.
We just talked about the Matt Eberflus thing with Adam Schefter's report on Twitter, and I think that You look at this Bears offense. There's a lot of pieces that they can work with. A lot of pieces that we'd be excited to draft this coming year as well. Farrell, when you look at Justin Fields, what he did year one with the right offensive coordinator or right quarterbacks coach, we'll say, for the 2022 season, realistically, could he be like a top 7 or top 8 fantasy quarterback right away this year?
Oh, sure he could, especially with this kind of defense. Eberflus he's inheriting some guys that can really bring it on the defensive side of the ball, and they'll be better against him. His teams have always been amongst the very best in the league defensively. The peanut punch will be back, creating those turnovers on Chicago defense. Attention to the general manager here. This is Ryan Poles, who is a fascinating story, Balky. Here's a guy that was blocking for Matt Ryan at Boston College and was a free agent. I remember when he signed with the Bears, and he hung around a bit, and then he went to work back at Boston College. He's the kind of guy that people don't want to let get out of a room. And if you look at him today, walking, the media pictures of him, he's a relatively thin guy walking around in an Italian suit. This used to be a big offensive lineman. And he's just 12 years removed from signing as a free agent, 12, 13 years removed from that. So it's just how far you can go in football in a short time if you have the talent. He's been given reins, an historically great franchise. It's very, very important who they hire to bring this quarterback along. And that's one of the most interesting hires, one of the places that I want to look at. And if they hire the right guy, I'm going to elevate the Bears that I'm going to draft, especially Darnell Mooney. And I think in the division that I'm in, or the league that I'm in the never too early, Mooney flew off the board quicker than I could get to him.
Farrell, let's as long as we have some time here, we're having some technical difficulties with Mike and trying to get him in. But as long as we have the chance here, let's kind of talk about this never too early team that you're putting together here so far from the 4 spot, which we touched on at the top of the show. So before we get to that, I noticed that in the ADP on FantasyMojo.com has Christian McCaffrey at 102, 103. Now, I noticed he did not go until 106 in this draft. But your thoughts, because you had the opportunity to grab McCaffrey at 104, you passed on him. Are you surprised that so many FFPC drafts have McCaffrey going this early?
Am I surprised he's going 6th? That hasn't going to 6th? No, I'm really surprised. Whoever takes him is taking a great leap of faith. I would think it's a person that's going to draft multiple teams. We all have complained about availability this year of star players and first-round bust, and how our teams were ruined by players who were not available. And then to jump in immediately to the player that you can least likely to be on the field would be somewhat foolish. I know it's a $125 buy-in, and I think it's the best $125 I've ever spent, because it is a blast, and I'm enjoying drafting it. But I tell you what, I want to enjoy my season too, and I don't think Christian McCaffrey will let me do
that. So Austin Eckler, explain that a little bit there. Were you locked into a running back there, or was Eckler just too good to pass up?
Too good to pass up. Those 20 touchdowns from last year, and I just have a high appreciation with Austin Eckler, and I wanted to build a bit of a Charger stack of the Chargers that I wanted. I got on the roster, and I think that's a good place to be with what that team's going to look like in 2022.
All right, so the other thing I want to talk, so you get Eckler here with the 104. You come back in the second round and you get Stephon Diggs. What are your concerns, or I guess maybe you have no concerns after Gabriel Davis's big AFC divisional round? Actually, could it be Diggs and Davis and Cole Beasley as the odd man out in Buffalo next year?
Well, yeah, Buffalo has two receivers north of 30 years old, and they still contribute, but at some point in time, it's going to end. And you and I have been Davis fans since he got his first opportunity off the practice squad and off special teams. No, Diggs is one of the top skill receivers in the league. I was a little surprised that he was there, and I was thrilled to get him.
The third round, you end up getting George Kittle. The importance of getting a tight end early in this format is obviously it's been talked a ton on this show, as well it should be. Kittle next year, who's throwing him the rock? Is it Trey Lance or is it Jimmy Garoppolo or somebody else?
Who knows? But, yeah, you know, it's one of the finest football players in the game. I've never had Kittle on too many of my rosters. I've always wanted this past year to grab Andrews. He was the one I targeted. So I was pleased to get Kittle. I think in this format, you're going to get big games out of him enough to make it pay. And, you know, I'm with 20 rounds now in the slim. I'm not through drafting tight ends. I've got some guys that I've got my eye on, and I look forward to what that final roster is going to look like. But I love the position, so I'm far from through.
With those two extra positions that you have in with the 20 rounds this year, with FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament, what do you think most people will be using those extra spots on? Is it an extra tight end, like you said? There's an extra quarterback would be a possibility as well. What do you think most high stakes players are going to be doing?
I think extra quarterback is a probability, and it allows you to wait a little bit on the quarterback. I think that's what we're seeing in this draft. Last year they moved off, with 18 players, they moved off of the board much more quickly, at least in my limited experience. That's what I recall. And yes, and the extra tight end, it also allows at that end of the draft you to pick up the rookie or to pick up the handcuff that you might have for one of your other players. And so I'm thrilled we went to 20. It makes more sense to me than 18, and it tests the overall knowledge of the player pool by the drafters. So I think it's a very good move.
Elijah Mitchell, you go back-to-back Niners here, so you're obviously a big believer in him being the guy next year. Trey Sermon, is he simply, an afterthought? Is he even a handcuff next year? You think about all that draft capital that San Francisco invested into him, and it was Elijah Mitchell that really took control of that backfield when he was healthy.
Yeah, teams don't, when the draft is over, teams look at it as the draft class. And it really doesn't matter to them if they drafted a player, whatever round it is, as long as they got the players to help the team. So, they don't say, well, we got to play this guy because we drafted him earlier than that guy. That's not the way they think, especially now with the rookie pool. It used to be that way when you put big signing bonuses into young players, but that's not that way anymore. Mitchell is what's the word, Bucky? Bell cow. That's the expression. He is the bell cow. We talked about it last week. Would he get 20 carries? And he did. And I love the way he plays the game. He's a young player that's only going to get better. And but we got a coach, remember, we got a coach promising us 500 carries. So if we want to get in business with running backs, you might as well go to a team where the coach says we're going to run the ball 500 times.
Back-to-back Chargers here. Well, I shouldn't say back-to-back Chargers. Mike Williams, do you think he ends up in Los Angeles here, Farrell? Or again, when we draft this early, we're looking for talent when it comes to free agents. Mm-hmm. Mike Williams, and anybody who is going to pay the money to bring him on is certainly going to give him the ball a lot. This could be a huge upside pick here, whether it's Justin Herbert throwing into him or not.
I think it's going to be Herbert. He's a guy that if they cannot fashion a long-term deal, he's ideally what the franchise tag was created for. And either way, I think he would be happy with a long-term deal. And if they apply the tag, they can continue to negotiate through it, which should arrive at this player being rewarded. And, he's coming off quite a year last year. Fantastic year.
And then I guess there's nothing really much to say about, obviously after Herbert, you grabbed Tony Pollard here. No surprise, Chase Claypool, sort of a prerequisite for a Farrell Elliott-led team. You have to have Claypool on no matter who the receiver is, right? Or who the quarterback is.
You can't easily replace that talent with the size and the speed. He had his sophomore slump. He had his issues. He'll be the type of player that will bounce back. We haven't seen the best football from him. If you notice, another drafter prior to me taking Claypool took Kadarius Toney. I was operating under the idea that I could get Toney 9th, 10th, 11th round, especially with the hire that went to the New York Giants. I'm saying, boy, that's a natural. But, yes, I'm a big believer in Claypool's talent. That talent will come shining through, and he's my number 3 receiver right now, correct?
That is correct, yeah, because he is behind. We just talked about Mike Williams, and then he's also behind Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, so as my number 3 guy, I think he'll outperform most number 3 receivers, and in this format, that makes me happy.
I'm just looking at this here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 tight ends off the board through 8 rounds. Does that seem like that's not a lot? To me, I feel like through 8 rounds, we normally see the better part of 12 or maybe more. Or what's been your experience here with this type of format?
Well, my experience with this type of format is limited because I only played it twice last year, but it quickly became my favorite format, as we discussed on other shows, that the elimination aspect once you get in the playoffs is a pretty exciting aspect of this. But I think there is, once we get past that elite group of tight ends, we saw this season elevation in the performance of tight ends that were just question marks last year. And we did not see anyone join. We didn't see anyone particularly join the elite group, but we did see some people solidify themselves into the big group, and we saw young tight ends elevate themselves as well. We had some disappointments. You would have to think what went on at New England with both players was a little disappointing and a disaster with Smith, but there weren't a lot of situations like that. So the short answer to your question is that the pool of good, solid, dependable, contributing tight ends grew. The elite tight ends didn't, and it grew with young players that I think drafters feel that they will be more trustworthy and better players coming into 2022.
So as you approach the halfway point of the first Never Too Early, the inaugural FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament team that you're drafting, Farrell, we shall be following that. We'll talk a little bit more about it on next week's show because I'm curious to see how the next several rounds are going to go for you and how this team ends up coming together. So just if you tuned in hoping to hear from Mike Zuka, we're having technical difficulties, as Hudson Kern-Reed pointed out in the chat room, and Dizzle, actually. This was a human error that turned into technical difficulties. So my apologies that I totally dropped the ball on this tonight, ladies and gentlemen. But I have confirmed that Mike Zuka will be joining us next week, along with another guest that I'll get to at the end of the program, tell you who else is coming on. But Mike will not be joining us tonight, so this might be an abbreviated high-stakes fantasy football hour. But as long as we have your emails here that have come in, I do want to get to them with Farrell because there's a lot of good stuff in here as far as people who are, if you are drafting this weekend, you're going to be able to use this to your advantage. So let's get to it. Tom in Waco, Texas leads things off here tonight. He writes, is James Robinson's injury enough for you to want to draft Travis Etienne ahead of Clyde Edwards-Helaire this season? Thank you. That is Tom in Waco, Texas. So I don't know, when you look at this, Farrell, these two players and just bringing up the mojo here on them right now, Travis Etienne is currently going at running back 23. Oh, my goodness. Okay, so ETN, running back 23 at the 504. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, running back 24 at the 506. They're going back-to-back. They're actually going right behind Breece Hall, the rookie running back out of Iowa State, and Leonard Fournette going right ahead of them. Michael Carter, Devin Singletary, Damian Harris going right behind them. But ETN versus Edwards-Helaire, do you have a strong feeling on this, or is it what the high-stakes players are saying it is right now? That's basically a coin flip.
It is. It's coin flip, big question marks for players. I think if you're sitting there saying, I don't know if I would draft one of those guys, and if somebody drafts one of them, you say, well, I'll draft the other one. But I don't necessarily like those picks. I really admire Travis Etienne, and I think he'll be a fantastic player. But I've got to see what comes together around him and who's going to be hired to run that team. And I had high hopes for it last year, and they never materialized. And as far as Robinson, I think when there is questions and it's nebulous about what will happen in a backfield, that you can choose a player like Robinson and hope that he returns from his injury, even though it was late in the season. Hopefully he returns from his injury in time to give you something. You know, Robinson was a player, one of my favorite stats is for a running back from inside the 5-yard line who was handed the ball inside the 5-yard line, a touchdown percentage, and he led the league in that. When he gets in the red zone, he finds a way in the end zone. I want Robinson to get healthy, as I want to get him back on my teams. He's the one player that I think has proven to me that throughout any kind of situation that he can be successful.
Yeah, bad quarterback, a rookie quarterback, bad offense. He's been the man, and he's done it under some pretty daunting circumstances, like stuff that, you think about some of these great running backs or at least good running backs that we have high hopes for who get, put behind really good offensive lines and good situations with elite offenses, and they can't get it done. And look at what James Robinson's done with Jacksonville. Kudos to him, and certainly we wish him a speedy recovery as well. A couple of questions from the chat room that we have in here tonight, Farrell, as we adjust back to the playoffs. Hudson Kern-Reeve wants to know who we think, I should say, is going to score the most fantasy points in the NFC Conference Championship for the Niners. Is it George Kittle? Is it Elijah Mitchell? Or Deebo Samuel? This is against the Rams in Los Angeles. I don't want to qualify it as a road game because there could be more Niners fans there than Rams fans. But who is going to score the most points for the Niners on Sunday?
Boy, that's a tough one. And the professor is the guy with the crystal ball. Despite everything, Balky, he's got. Why is he asking lesser mortals like us these kind of questions? Here's an interesting stat, Professor. The over-under from our friends in the desert on rushing yardage for Deebo Samuel is 39 yards. And Deebo Samuel has hit that figure many, many times this season, including one previous big game against the Rams. We got a coach that wants to run it multiple times, so either of those running backs could do very well. Kittle against this defense, it will draw so much heat. And I've said this so many times on the show, people will get tired of listening to it, but Kittle has to do so much in this offense, and he will have so much responsibility with this pass rush from the Rams that Kittle's biggest contribution to this game may be buying Garoppolo time. That's why the two running backs and perhaps one of the better things that you could talk about is which receiver is going to do well in this game. Jennings has shown himself to be more dependable. Ayuk has stepped up. I think to answer your question, fantasy points, Deebo Samuel.
What's interesting is I look back at this Rams-Niners game Week 18 when the Niners won in overtime also at SoFi. George Kittle, 5 catches, yeah, but only for 10 yards. So I don't know if that was just a one-off but it has me hesitating before I can pick Kittle here So I don't think I'm going to. And I think Samuel's an excellent choice. 140 total yards that game, and he was a huge reason they got back into this game too.
Sure.
Elijah Mitchell still churned out 21 carries, 85 yards, no catches on the game. I think I am going to lean towards Samuel, but it is razor close. And the fact that you had just drafted Elijah Mitchell, Farrell, is maybe I should be picking him. But I think I'm going to go with you and take Samuel. It's close between Samuel and Mitchell. I definitely cannot say Kittle at this point in time. He also wants to know, does the Cornell professor, which chief is most valuable from here on out? And I assume he means not only the AFC championship, but he's assuming the Chiefs win and get to the Super Bowl. Is it Tyreek Hill? Is it Patrick Mahomes? Or is it Travis Kelce? I'll answer this one first. I have been, on the record, check the receipts. I've been saying that Travis Kelce was going to be a big-time difference maker in the FFPC playoff challenges and the Football Guys playoff challenges. I'm not changing that right now. I do think the Chiefs beat the Bengals. I do think Travis Kelce is a big reason why, and I think he has a big Super Bowl as well. So pen me in for Travis Kelce as the most valuable Chief from here on out, Farrell.
Why not? And, what Garoppolo said when they asked him what hurt worse, his finger or his shoulder, and he said yes. So that's my answer to the professor is yes. Those players are good. Those players are good players. Hill has really stepped up, and it's just fascinating what he has done in these games and how he's turned it on and it's just all great. Mahomes is the guy I want. My answer is yes, Professor. I have a question for the Professor. I need a consult with him, and I'm wondering when I can get one. I keep going by the door and signing the sheet that, I would like to see him like we did it back in the 70s and 80s. I suppose now most of it is virtual, but I can't get the Professor on the phone, something I'm trying to do before our big event. So, he needs to check in with me, is all I'm saying.
I have posed that question to him in the chat room right now, and as soon as we get his answer, I will definitely let you know. Moving on to Tyler in Washington, D.C., who ironically has a West Coast question here. I know DeAndre Hopkins will still probably be first for Arizona, but who should their next wide receiver off the board be? Christian Kirk or Rondale Moore? Tyler in Washington, D.C., thank you so much for listening. Kirk was, I think these guys, I could be wrong, Farrell, you might know this better than me. I think these guys, obviously they were drafted different years, but I think they were both second-round picks, and I think people were pretty excited about it, when both of them got drafted. Is Rondale Moore a guy that you can take ahead of Christian Kirk next year? I think for me, I'm still going with Kirk.
Yeah, and I think you should. The bigger play is probably Moore. I think that the team has to look within what they have in that talent there and let him do more. Because he's in a situation where he does a lot of gadget plays. He catches balls close to the line. He's running some jet sweeps. He's got tremendous talent. He's got durability. He needs to be employed downfield where he can frustrate. You talk about these great receivers that break the ankles of the defensive backs and just leave them standing, and that's the kind of talent Rondale Moore has. So I don't think that he's been utilized. The word is not properly, but he's been utilized to the extent of his skill set. They see a need for him within their mix of players. That's how they're using him. I would just cut him loose and open up the playbook and build so much of it around him. And if they were to do that, then, Rondale Moore, wherever Darren wants to tell us he's going in the drafts, Rondale Moore would be a huge potential champion for you. I don't think Christian Kirk is going to win you any leagues, but Rondale Moore might if they would really get after him as a player.
According to the Fantasy Mojo ADP right now, these guys are also pretty close together. Rondale Moore is going as wide receiver 48, Christian Kirk wide receiver 46, but both of them going at the end of the 10th round. Actually, Chris Olave, rookie receiver, from Ohio State going right between them. Moving on here, Farrell, Hudson did say you can reach him anytime after February 8th, but he is swamped until then. He says it is a busy time of year for department chairs. So that's the situation right now.
He doesn't get to sleep in very often, I understand.
He doesn't get to sleep. Another email here that we have. Let's go to stay on the West Coast. Oh, no, we're going to move out to the West Coast. From Washington to Portland, Oregon, Carl writes, happy conference championship weekend, gentlemen. Quarterbacks are probably going to affect these two tight ends ADPs the most, but right now is Noah Fant still the right call over Pat Freiermuth? Enjoy the games on Sunday. That is Carl in Portland, Oregon. Just looking at your draft here right now, Farrell, for these that you drafted in the never too early, it looks like Noah Fant went in the 8th round, but Freiermuth is still out there. You did not have a chance at Fant in the 8th. I don't know if you were going to go tight end there had he still been available, but how do you look at these players? Fant coming in to his 3rd year in the league, Freiermuth embarking on his sophomore campaign.
We brought up Freiermuth on the show when no one really knew how to pronounce his name. We just called him Baby Gronk. And I think that's the kind of career that he has in front of him. And anyone that watched him play with Roethlisberger this year they could see the talent here. And as a rookie tight end, people say, rookie tight ends. And, in the confusion that existed in Pittsburgh, he caught 60 balls this year. And I think his ceiling is unlimited. He's a player that I'm high on. So yeah, I like him better than Fant. You would think, well, okay, the Broncos they're going to unleash the new offensive coordinators, new head coach. It's going to be fantastic out there in Denver. Well, you just hired a guy that never really, it's just a great track record he's got, but never really has featured the tight end. I don't know if Fant's a typical tight end. To me, he looks more like a slot receiver from time to time, but it would give me pause a little bit.
I wonder if he would be included in a potential Packers-Broncos trade. Would Noah Fant, knowing that maybe Nathaniel Hackett doesn't like the tight end to be a focal point in his offense. Maybe Matt LaFleur would. Interesting stuff to think about. We're living in the matrix a little bit until we find out what's going on with Aaron Rodgers in going forward. But it is still fun to ponder and bandy that thought about here. Let's get to one more email here. Donnie in Brooklyn. Hey, Farrell and Balky, do you think Trey Lance starts over Jimmy Garoppolo next year? And if that's the case, do I need to draft him over Russell Wilson in FFPC leagues right now? Donnie in Brooklyn, thank you for listening. Thank you for the email. Trey Lance, is he on the Jordan Love slow roll plan, or is he on the fast track to being the Niners starter? And this, okay, so let's back up a little bit. Farrell, what happens if the Niners keep winning and they win a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo? Then what happens next year at the quarterback position?
Years ago we saw it with a quarterback in Baltimore that quarterback moved on. It's not unheard of. I don't think that in this day and age that you would be successful tearing up your team at the quarterback position, especially a player that's as popular as Garoppolo. All he does is win. All he is tough. He's only 30 years old. Everybody talks about these quarterbacks playing to certain ages. Well, he's 30 years old, and, how do you walk away from the success that he's had this season, regardless of what happens this weekend against the Rams? So I'm a Garoppolo guy, and I'm sticking with him. And I think that's the kind of front office that this team has. Could be wrong, but that's the way I see it.
All right, okay. Let's just say they flame out, right? And maybe they lose a close game, or maybe they lose a game where Jimmy Garoppolo was responsible for a late turnover or something like that. Going forward next season, do you still believe that Kyle Shanahan will enter the 2022 season with Garoppolo as his starter, with Lance still learning on the bench?
Well, it won't be no, the decision would be made in the front office. In other words, they won't go to camp and the job all of a sudden become Lance's. There won't be any, this will take place in the business season, and that's when the reins would be given to Lance. And Garoppolo would go on to where he's going to be and continue with his career and see if he can continue his winning ways. You hear people say, well, they win with Garoppolo. They don't win because of him. And I'm not buying that. He's there. He's driving the car, and the team is winning. And, teammates respond to him, and they like playing with him, and they like playing for him.
What about the flip side of this question here in Russell Wilson? Because obviously we're at a crossroads in Seattle, or at least a lot of people believe we're at a crossroads there. We don't know if he's going to be coming back. I think that it's much more likely he goes back to Seattle than Rodgers stays in Green Bay. But, he's going right after Aaron Rodgers in drafts in the FFPC right now, the middle of the 8th round. And I don't know what you think about, because I've heard people around the NFL say that his skills are indeed declining right now. So a change of scenery maybe necessarily wouldn't help out his fantasy prospects. Do you see it the same way?
He could probably use a jump start in his career. Back when the world didn't know what COVID was, he signed a $140 million contract. We tend to forget that, what is invested in this player. I think that a rebuild, a decision to rebuild in Seattle and what you would have to do to change the whole look of that organization, that it would include a moving Russell Wilson. And Russell Wilson would be a wonderful quarterback in a lot of systems, including Pittsburgh.
Farrell, that is, I think, that's the last email we have tonight. We'll cut the show a little bit short because we got to prep for 2 guests next week, assuming I could set the show up right, which would really be tremendous. So I do want to thank you.
I'm missing talking to the Z-Man. I really am.
Yeah. Well, we will next week. We're going to talk to him, and I do want to thank you, the FFPC, Rob Rice, and of course each and every one of these listeners that are listening to the podcast right now. So next Friday we'll return live at 10/9 Central. We'll have Mike Zuka, and we're also going to have the 2021 $10,000 FFPC Super Bracket champion Zeb Cap make his triumphant return to the program. So Zuka and Zeb next week, a pair of Z guys, which will be the first time in podcast history, undoubtedly. Farrell, for anybody who is wondering how to get involved with the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship right now, best way to do it is go to kffsc.com and then be sure to book those flights and get to that party for Super Sunday, right?
And if you can't make it at this late date and you just don't feel like traveling, call me. We've got an online option. We've got a couple hybrid leagues at time slots. Balky, as far as the party is concerned, it's open to our people that want to come and take part of it. We've got a good crowd coming. The room is beautiful, and I spent some time over there this week at Caesars, Southern Indiana, and the casino is ready in the sports book to handle any type of wagering that our fantasy players would like to do. But fantasy football is definitely not about gambling. It's about playing our season-long football like we like to play it. And I was talking about the room. It's got a beautiful balcony. We had a unusually warm day here a few days ago, and when you told, I had my buddy Fetch with me, and when you told us that you weren't coming, we just sat out on the balcony and stared into and had to get our minds right. But whoever isn't there will be missed. We're hoping to start a new tradition with our Super Bowl party and draft. And we got a lot of guys that love the draft. They're going to be there. But there's just a few spots left. And so if anybody would like to play, you're welcome to call me, 523-5057. I imagine by Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week we'll have the thing largely closed down, and we'll be going through with our group. But what a great way to end this season, and I look forward to not having to wait till August to see everyone. So it's a fantastic thing that I'm thinking here in a couple of weeks we'll be having.
Be sure to check out the Big Payback Super Sunday, the Super Sunday Championship over at kffsc.com. Spots still available, but time is running out as we are basically, what are we now, 3 weeks from the Super Bowl? I think that's accurate. Right?
2 weeks on this Sunday.
2 weeks this Sunday, so 2.5 weeks right now. Oh, my goodness, it's coming up way too fast. Farrell, always love talking to you. Thank you for putting up with my train wrecking of the show tonight, which I always enjoy. You are the man, and we will indeed talk to you next week with Zuka and Zeb.
See you then, Balky.
Farrell Elliott, ladies and gentlemen. You follow him on Twitter at jfarrellelliott. Follow the KFFSC on Twitter at KFFSC. Make sure you're registering for those leagues at kffsc.com. Also, to remind you, the inaugural, as we've been, really talking about it the whole time here on the program, the Never Too Early Best Ball Tourney is indeed live at myffpc.com/nevertooearly. It is a $125 entry fee that gets you a shot at a $25,000 grand prize in a $133,000 prize pool. This is limited to the first 1,152 teams. The drafts just kicked off this past week. They're going to run all the way to April 28th, 2022. That is the last day you can sign up. I beg your pardon. That is the last day you can complete a draft in this contest. It's a best ball slim format. Remember, the FFPC switched from 18-round slims last year to 20-round slims this year. However, still no kickers and no defenses in this format. Features a 14-week regular season and a single-week elimination playoffs from weeks 15 through 17, crowning a champion that final week. The drafts are indeed available in a 30-second sit-and-go format, as well as 2-hour and 6-hour slow drafts, and then the live draft schedule. Those have 60-second timers, one going off tomorrow night, the 29th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, if you are looking for another year-round challenge, there are dozens of Dynasty Orphans available at myffpc.com/dynasty for sale. So make sure you're taking a peek at those. A lot of really good ones on there. Some discounted as low as $1, and some are not bad teams. Just a case of owners needing to duck out from Dynasty for a year or two, what have you. And they're putting up some pretty good teams up there. So make sure you're giving a cursory glance to those. You might find your next championship team right in there. That will complete our show for this evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, I do apologize that we could not get Mike Zuka on. I do promise we will indeed get Mike Zuka on next week along with Zeb Cap. So we're going to have a ton of prize winners on the show. 2 prize winners on the show next week, who won a ton of money this past week. So this past year. Thank you so much for listening, everybody, on the podcast and putting up with this. We had a blast, and we'll do it again next week. Your weekend.
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, presented by myffpc.com. It was broadcast live and heard around the world. Balky and Farrell will be back next week with more analysis, interviews, and advice from guests much smarter than they are. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk with you again next week.
Thanks for listening, ladies and gentlemen. It's amazing how one click of the mouse can train wreck an entire show, but that's what happened when I set this program up this week. So I do apologize for that, but you are the beneficiary and the winner, and you come out ahead in all this because we get 2 great guests next week, which is going to be a lot of fun. Thanks for listening, everybody. Enjoy the conference championship games on Sunday, and we'll be back to talk not only Pro Football Championship next week, but getting an early start on 2022 drafts as well, getting thoughts on the early ADP from 2 guys that work as hard as anybody in this industry to help themselves win, and they'll be helping you win next week. Thanks again, everybody.